everybody, it's Romania Black, and we are on episode 10 of Vinland Saga Season 2, and it is freezing outside as I'm recording this. It is so cold today where I am at, and so I have the hottest cup of coffee, and I am bundled up, and I am ready for some Vinland Saga, because, not gonna lie, the last several episodes have been really good, and I feel like I need Thorfinn and Einar to warm me up, so that's where we are at. No, the last few episodes have been so good. Empty Man and Oath have been just... they have had my heart. I did not expect to be simping for, supporting, rooting for, and actively wanting Thorfinn to go on this journey and to be at this point. It has warmed my heart in ways that I cannot describe to you all, and I'm just so thankful for it. It's just like, what can we do? And so I'm really excited about the fact that Thorfinn's grown so much over this season and has had 10 solid episodes to grow, or 9 solid episodes to grow as a character. I mean, that's like nearly half of last season, right? And that it's been such a great turnaround. And it kind of makes sense, you know, because the very first season was technically the prologue. So it makes sense Thorfinn didn't grow throughout that prologue, and now he's getting the chance to do so. So that's kind of cool. But yeah, it's not going to be easy. I loved how people in the comments were like, yeah, Thorfinn's swearing off violence. You don't just do that in this world of Viking warfare. So it's going to be an uphill battle for Thorfinn. But what I like about it is he's not alone. He has Einar with him, and even though Einar doesn't exactly understand what's going on, he's like, oh buddy, oh pal, best friend, I'll help you. And it's like, good. I'm glad Einar is there to support Thorfinn. That always is a good thing. But yeah, I've got a couple comments before we start this episode. I'm really excited. I'm excited to see where we go to from here. Like, now that Thorfinn has swore off violence, and he's gonna... it kind of reminds me of the very end where he has the hoe, right? Some people shared some official art, and it was like Thorfinn with the hoe. You had Askeladd with the sword, and you had him with the hoe. I liked that a lot. And the hoe is in the OP, so that makes sense too. But I like it because it kind of compares to Sverkel just a little bit. Like, Sverkel has, like, the farming became his livelihood, and he loved it. And I feel like there's a lot of connection between him and Thorfinn, so I'm all about that, right? But I do have a few quick comments. Speaking of Sverkel, Morales says, Sverkel helping to teach Thorfinn something other than how to fight. Yeah, he says in the last episode, it's like, you just do one trek at a time. Like, back in episode 8, I guess, he was saying you just do it one day at a time. One thing, like, if you don't want to fight, find something else to do to take up your time that you can teach yourself. So if it's farming, if it's this, anything that lets you progress. And I'm like, awesome. And so I love that connection of Thorfinn learning how to farm. And also, Morales said that the cliff in the nightmares that Thorfinn was having was connecting to where Thor's was killed. And I'm like, oh, so it all just comes back around, right? I love the idea that Askeladd and Thor's are like the two father figures Thorfinn's had in his life. And then Tyler Casterline, I thought that was really cool. Tyler Casterline noted this on Patreon, that when Thorfinn picks up Einar at the end of the episode, and he like starts walking that way with him, the road is split in two. There's like a little margin of grass in between the road, and it's split into two directions. And both Thorfinn and Thor's are on the right side of the road. So I don't know if that means that Thorfinn is starting to walk on the right side of things, chasing after his father and his father's ideals. I would like Thorfinn to become this middle ground between Askeladd and Thor's, because I could see some people thinking that Thor's was too idealistic, and some people thinking Askeladd was too cold and cynical, and Thorfinn could kind of become that middle ground where he's not as cold and cynical as Askeladd, who hates himself, but he's also not as idealistic as Thor's, that doesn't take into the gravity of reality of the situation. So I think maybe Thorfinn could be this cool middle ground, or that's what he could develop into. We shall see, right? We shall see. But I've really enjoyed this season. I'm really excited. I don't know. My theory is I think we will get a new OP and a new ED, but I think it's going to be like around episodes 12 or 13. I don't want to know, though. So don't tell me in the comments. I want to find out and be surprised when the episode drops. That's one of my favorite things, is that you know there's going to be a new core for a new ED and OP, but I love being surprised by it. So We'll see. The only thing I would like you to tell me is if you do watch it and you're like, whoa, Romania, there are some major spoilers with that OP. But this one wasn't really spoilery. It was spoilers without context. I can do an OP and ED like this. Like, everything so far in the OP and ED have technically been things we've encountered in the series, but unless you watch the episodes, you don't know that. It's not like a Bleach OP that just comes out and shows you all the battles that are going to take place, and you're like, oh, well, that's what we got to look forward to. Great. But I'm really excited, y'all, to dive into this. Real quick before we begin, though, I do want to give a very special shout out to our philanthropy tier over on Patreon. Our philanthropy tier, I have 3 different tiers on my channel over there on Patreon. One is just for Discord access and the polls. One is to get videos a week ahead of time along with access to the Discord and the polls. And then the final one is all 3 of those things as well as mentioned in these videos. And if I have any ties, y'all are tiebreakers. And that is the philanthropy tier over on Patreon. And we have 10 members right now that I want to give a special shout out to. And that is Kenny, Truck, Dana, Edgar, Tyrone, Larry Manning, Anime Annie, Shimoyama, Arjo, and Be Happy. Thank you all so much for your support and kindness. I really do appreciate it, and I'm very, very grateful for everything that you do to help me to continue to talk about shows like this that are amazing, right? So, all of my love. But with that being said, I'm ready to dive in, y'all. I hope you all are too, but we're not going to waste any more time. We are going to see Vinland Saga episode 10, and we are going to do that here in 3, 2, 1, and let's go. This episode was a dream. Not like a dream, like a did this really happen? No, this episode was a dream. This season has not missed. And no, the last several episodes have been just absolutely amazing. And this episode was absolutely amazing. And people that are sleeping on this series are like, oh, Farmland Saga, get out of here, because this season is amazing. I freaking love it. And it is building, and we are developing this such interesting dynamic between Canute and Thorfinn that it's kind of fascinating. It's kind of, I honestly did not picture it going this way. I had these lofty ideals way back in season 1. If you asked me back in season 1 where I thought the story was going to go with Canute and Thorfinn, I really honestly thought up until 3/4 of the way through the season, I really thought that Askeladd was going to be on this journey a lot longer than he ended up being. I thought him and Canute were going to go and end up taking on Swin, and there being this big battle, and Thorkel getting involved, and like Floki getting involved. It was going to be this big old thing, and then Harold was going to get involved. I thought Harold was going to be this big antagonistic character that hated Canute, or was like this big arrogant like Gaston type character to ride in and be pompous. And it was going to be this big old thing, and Thorfinn was going to like learn about Floki, and it was going to be all this drama. But no, that's not the direction it went. Instead, you have these 2 characters who are surrounded by death, and they come from very different circumstances, and they come from very different upbringings, and they've reached very different points at seemingly the same time. So what's fascinating about this is the timeline in all of this, that they said that Kettle said he was going to see Harold. So I'm assuming, and I don't want to know whether I'm right or wrong. We'll find out. This series has been very smart about the timeline, in that it has only given us the bare minimum to make out what the timeline is. The bare minimum. They keep a lot of it in the dark, and I think that's intentional, to be like, eventually the timelines are going to merge. Thorfinn's timeline, Canute's timeline are eventually, I think, going to merge. Now the question is, at what point? I could definitely see this season doing one of 2 things. Either the series is really going to have Canute and Thorfinn meet up fairly soon, and they're going to have an encounter, and then they're going to go separate ways, and then their next encounter will be much later on in the story. I could see that. Or this series is going to be one of those things where Canute and Thorfinn don't see each other until the very end of the story. And then at the climax of the story, that's when they're going to see each other again for the first time. And it's going to be like, holy cow, this is how much they've changed, right? That's what I'm thinking. I think it's either, it could go one of 2 ways. Either they're going to hold off on seeing each other till the very climax of the story, or they're going to see each other this season, but it's going to be like through an incident because they're going to get free soon, through an incident, and then they're going to go separate ways. And then the separate ways is going to be the determining factor of when they meet again. So there's a lot of things to talk about in this episode, and I kind of wanted to... God, Canute going all Hamlet and talking to the ghost of his dead father. I was like, red flag. There's like so many red flags. Girl with the water, get out of there. Like, you do not need to be around Canute. No, because God, you know what the sad thing is? Thorfinn's in a really good place, and I want him to stay in that good place, and I'm afraid this series isn't going to let me have nice things. It's not going to keep him in a good place. And I'm like, no, Thorfinn's like the best he's ever been. We'll talk about that damn like Top Gun erotic. It's not erotic, but I'm making it erotic because it's how I roll. The scene between Einar and Thorfinn, I will get to it. Y'all are going to hate me. But I don't care. So we'll get to it. But yeah, Thorfinn's having the time of his life, living his best life these last few years, and we'll talk about that with him. Meanwhile, Canute is sinking deeper and deeper into this insanity that he has wrought himself. And it's like, dude, just the difference between them. I am reeling. I love this episode so much and what it represents. But, well, okay. So out here to the side, we're gonna put Canute. We're going to put Canute here out to the side. And we're going to put Thorfinn over here. And so they come from very, very different upbringings, right? You have Canute that was born into a royal family. And you have Thorfinn that was born into... He wasn't born into poverty because his mom, she was kind of from like a military family. I'm going to say, upper middle class. If we're going by U.S. class systems here, they're like upper middle class. Let's be real. Thorfinn did not grow up in poverty. No, they had sheep. They had a nice house. He had the mom had military connections. His dad was like a decorated general that just happened to desert, but he had, accolades. They weren't poor and they were pretty well off, but they weren't royalty, right? So they were like, different upbringings, but like Thorfinn wasn't the polar opposite of Canute. There were threads that were similar. They were pretty well off. However, Canute describes himself as growing up amid bloodshed and the battle for the throne, right? The only exception to that he says was his brother Harold. So they talked about in season 1 that there were lots of battles for the throne, like his siblings killed each other trying to get the throne, and we see Canute on the throne in season 1, and there's all the bloodshed happening around him, which led me to believe that Harold was not a nice guy. It led me to believe that Harold had tried to kill him or something. But we find out that no, Harold is totally chill. They were he was a really good brother. He kind of has an Einar vibe to him, right? A little bit. He kind of has an Einar vibe where he's just looking out for his brother, right? And we're also going to say that Enid or Erinid, she's here too, but he doesn't seem to care for her. He's like, get out. She's in the way, right? The sister, who looks a lot like him. I'm guessing they're full siblings probably because they look almost exactly identical. It wouldn't surprise me if she was like a twin or something, but probably not. But Thorfinn, born upper middle class, but he had a great childhood with a loving family. Right? And we don't know about his mom. We'll get to the whole thing about what he's going to do afterwards, his mom and his sister and all that. But he had a loving family, right? But where just like Canute faced bloodshed as a kid, we also have Thorfinn, who lost his father, who died at Askeladd's hands at age 6. Man, Askeladd's just killing dads left and right? So Askeladd kills Canute's dad, he kills Thor. He technically is responsible for Thor's death. Askeladd's just involved in everybody's death. But the thing about it is, that is a major difference, is that Thorfinn did not want this. Thorfinn never wanted his father dead. Ever. Like, he loved his father. He may have disagreed with him as a kid and thought that he didn't understand some of the stuff his dad was telling him, but he never hated his father. He loved him. And so his death, so Thor's death, it basically like rocks. It rocks and destroys Thorfinn's innocence, which there's some really cool parallels, but also contrasts within those parallels. So here you have Thorfinn's innocence is destroyed by his father's death. I would argue the exact same thing happens to Canute. Canute's innocence is destroyed by Sven's death. But here the thing is that Canute hated his father and wanted him dead. And so Askeladd, in killing him, we have Canute and his innocence being lost, right? Because I think that's the point the Curse of the Crown takes effect, right? Is that whole situation. So you have, through Askeladd, inadvertently for both of them, they've both lost their fathers. And it's, in Canute's case, the funny thing is, for Thorfinn, it ruins his life, the death of his father, right? In Canute's case, it is an achieved goal. So you have two very different outcomes in terms of them personally. Like, their innocence is lost in both situations. But for Canute, that was a goal. That was intended. He wanted that to happen. In Thorfinn's case, he did not want that to happen. That's the last thing he wanted to happen. So what ends up happening because of this is a very similar route for both of them. Canute, in attempting to solidify his claim, get this right, claim to the throne, in his attempts to solidify that claim and make sure he's the ruler, he's been killing his opponents. Now, obviously, Canute's timeline is a bit different than Thorfinn's, because Thorfinn, in an attempt to avenge his father, has been killing his opponents to get closer to Askeladd, right? The thing about Thorfinn is, at this point, Canute is still in this realm here, trying to solidify his claims, right? He's still trying to solidify everything. For Thorfinn, he was killing his opponents, but then, in turn, his revenge was denied by Canute. He became a slave and was confronted by the demons of his past. Now, what's interesting about all of this is that both Thorfinn and Canute have dreams and visions that involve their fathers, right? In Canute's case, the thing with his father is this representation of this idealistic optimism and happiness that Thorfinn doesn't think he deserves. He doesn't think he deserves that future and that ideology his father is prescribing, because he's killed all these people and he's let his father down, right? He believes that he's disappointed his father up until episode 9, when he decides to turn over a new leaf. So he's confronted by the demons of his past, and he agrees to move forward and take them with him. He's like, he acknowledges that he's killed these people, and he's like, I'm going to move forward and take them with me, and they are going to be my anchor to keep me grounded and remind me of what it's taken to get to this point, right? And so in doing so, we'll put this back up here. In doing so, for Thorfinn, he decides to pursue a life without violence, and additionally walk with his sins and let them be a reminder. So they're a constant reminder of what all he has lost and what he's been through to get to this point, and to keep him like on the straight and narrow, right? So that's Thorfinn. Now, his father, it represents something that is very idealistic and good. Canute's father represents he represents the ugly side of power, right? The ugly side of power. The idea of corruption. The idea that you have to become corrupt to gain success. That you have to, you're gonna have to play dirty if you're gonna, if you play the Game of Thrones, you either win or you die. That is the game, right? And so it's interesting that these two fathers represent very different things for each of their sons. And for Canute, the funny thing is, he does take the dead with him, but it's only his father. That's the crazy thing, is that he takes his father with him, as I guess as the weight of his sin. But the thing of it is he does not feel remorseful. Canute does not feel remorseful for anyone else he has killed up until this point. For him, they've all been stepping stones to get to his goal, which for Canute is very different from Thorfinn. His goal is to rule a quote-unquote utopia. And the only way to get that utopia is to be the only one in charge, and to thus to kill any opponent. It's like a dictatorship. He's like, I'm the only one that can create this utopia, and I'm the only one that can be in charge of it. So anyone else that tries to threaten me has to go. And Thorfinn, oddly enough, is kind of like, he doesn't want to be any sort of king. He wants to completely deny power other than his own freedom. He doesn't care about crowns or kings or anything like that. He wants to completely deny violence, and for there to he doesn't care who's in charge. He just wants his own freedom. Whereas the funny thing is, you have Thorfinn who's getting closer to his own freedom, and you have Canute who seems further away from it, right? And I don't think Canute even really realizes that he's further away from his own freedom. He thinks that he's going to gain this freedom through blood and violence, through iron and blood. And Thorfinn's like, been there, tried that, got the trauma, and now I'm trying to lose it, right? So what's fascinating about this is that Thorfinn carries the weight of all of the people he's killed. Like, he feels the guilt and remorse for every single person that he's killed. He doesn't know them. He doesn't know when they died, who they were, but he knows that mountain of bodies that's rising up to try to drag him down every time. He carries that weight with him, and that's what inspires him to pursue this life away from violence. He's like, this is like heavy and horrible, and he feels the weight of all the things that he's done. Whereas we just had an episode where Canute has killed all of these people to lead to this point, and he's kind of pretentious about it, and he's kind of like, well, this is necessary. My brother's death was a necessary death. It had to happen. Otherwise, we can't get the things that we want. And it's kind of like you have Thorfinn with a mound of dead bodies rising up to drag him down, and for Canute, there's only one head. It's just his father, and it's just his head. There's nothing else. So, and he easily dismisses it by the end of it. And he's like, well, I'll just accept you as part of me, and we'll just take on this curse together. And it's like, yeah, you did kill your dad. You were responsible for his death. You led Askeladd right to him, knowing what would happen. But what about all the other people you've killed? You don't feel bad for them. They were all necessary. So you have this idea where Thorfinn realizes from his father that no one deserves to be hurt. Thor's words in the last episode was, it's not okay to hurt anyone. You have no enemies. Again, the idea of no enemies but yourself. And you have that in direct contrast with Canute, who says that anyone deserves to be hurt if it's for the greater good. And the idea that anyone can be an enemy if they're in my way. So you have the polar opposites. You have Thorfinn going down one path and Canute going down the other path. Polar opposites. But it's just like Askeladd talked in the last episode. Canute's like in that pit. He's down in there, past the column. He's in it where it's just an eternal battle. Anyone is an enemy. Anyone must be slain. And he can't get out of it. Whereas Thorfinn is constantly fighting tooth and nail to get out of it. And the funny thing is, by this episode, you have Thorfinn in this mode of prayer where he puts his hands together like he's praying. Like he just wants there to be, he's like, is it possible for there to be no war or slavery? And Einar's like, well, that'd be the dream. And it's like, yeah. And then you have Canute who renounced and kind of gave up on religion. So in the funniest of ways, you have someone that grew up with all of this religion and he just denounces it like, that's getting me nowhere. And then you have someone who had no sense of religion at all who's kind of found it on his own. So it's, again, polar opposites. Now, do I think that Thorfinn is going to eventually battle Canute? I don't. That's the kind of the funny thing about this. I think that any other series would pit them against each other, like in this big shonen type battle, but this isn't a shonen, it's a seinen. And do I think that Thorfinn and Canute will come into a conflict with one another? Yes. I think that eventually they are going to come into conflict, but do I think they're going to battle each other? No. I think Thorfinn has had so much character development and so much change with him. And Canute has had character development too, but I feel like Canute's fallen more into the madness of it all, and Thorfinn's like clawing his way out. And if I'm being honest, I think Thorfinn's had to work way harder at it than Canute has. I think Canute has kind of just become corrupt. But it's happening so subtly that Canute's not really even fully aware of it. Like the fact that he's talking to himself, to like the ghost of his dead father, it's very Shakespearean. It's very Hamlet. It's very like he's just it. And Canute, of all characters, is being set up to be this like Shakespearean villain. I feel like Canute's developing into the villain of the series, which I'm excited by because I hesitate maybe to use the word villain, but Canute's definitely becoming like the antagonist. Like slowly but surely. Because here's the thing, and I gotta get another marker out for this, right? Kettle has been giving these donations for safety to Harold, who has upheld his promises. Because we come to find out Harold's a nice guy. Against all things, I was convinced Harold was going to be like the worst person ever, but he actually is a kind king, and he's been upholding Kettle's promises. Do I think Canute's going to do that? No, I don't, because I think Canute is not sympathetic like Harold was, right? I don't think that's the case. I think that Canute is possibly going to go back on Harold's words. Because for Canute has shown us he really doesn't care who he kills to get what he wants. He doesn't really care what ends up happening as long as he gets his way. And that's dangerous, right? And so I'm wondering if how Thorfinn is going to get involved or meet Canute is that I'm wondering if he's going to send for soldiers, which is how Omar could get involved. He's going to send for soldiers to come and help conquer the rest of England or wherever there's a threat. If Harold dies, I don't know what threat there would be except maybe to conquer. Are they going to go after Wales? That's the thing too. You promised Askeladd you wouldn't go after Wales. Are you going to go back on that? Canute's gotten greedy. He's gotten greedy. It's funny because Thorfinn's become humble. And Canute has gotten greedy. And I'm like, is he going to try to go for Wales? I don't know. I'm glad I'm not a history major at this point because otherwise I'd probably have an idea. But no, he's like, is he gonna go for Wales and go back on his promise to Askeladd? That would be rather interesting if the one person, Askeladd helped him get to where he is, and if he goes back on that promise to Askeladd, that would actually be amazing and would open up a lot of interesting discussion. But yeah, so he could send soldiers to Kettle's farm to try to enlist, and Olmar could try to enlist there. I don't think Thorfinn's going to join. I wondered back, several episodes ago if Thorfinn was going to try, like, if an army came from Canute to Kettle's farm and Thorfinn and Einar they escaped the farm and enlisted as soldiers to get away. I thought that was legitimately going to happen, but obviously not. Thorfinn doesn't even want to do violence, and Einar is a farmer. He's not a soldier. He's not a Viking. He doesn't care about that sort of thing. So I could see them both being like, no. But Olmar might go off and fight for Canute's army, and maybe that's how he tells Canute about Thorfinn and Einar. Maybe he'd be like, oh yeah, this guy Thorfinn, and Canute's like, just slowly does the head turn, like, who did you say? Like, what's going on? My past coming back to haunt me? What? Like, I could picture maybe Olmar connects to Canute that way. Or Canute visits Kettle's farm and is like, yeah, my brother died. I'm not upholding my brother's word anymore, so sorry, your donations are going to mean nothing to me. And that's how he meets Thorfinn, and maybe tries to enlist Thorfinn as a soldier, and Thorfinn's like, nah, I'm not into that scene anymore, and Canute's like, wait, what? I'm wondering if that might be something that happens. I feel like these two are inadvertently destined to be against one another in the craziest and weirdest of ways. It feels very Shakespearean that you had these two characters that started out on similar pathways and slowly diverted very much apart. I would love it if Canute starts to like get his own following and gets his own faction, kind of like Thor's had, because Thor's was charismatic. Thor's could instantly get people on board with him. Like, Askeladd was ready to give up his job to Thor's. Askeladd was ready to throw in the towel and be like, you want to take these guys over? Like, from meeting him for 4 hours. Like, I really want Thorfinn to get to the point where he kind of has the same influence. That would be great. And if Thorfinn gets like a following to him and Canute thinks it's a threat and Thorfinn's against violence and Canute doesn't understand it, like, there could be so much potential with that dynamic of these two characters going such separate ways, but having such intricate and layered and connected backstories that it makes me really excited to see what's going to happen between them, right? So, I don't know. I feel like the whole thing with Kettle was very ominous, first of all. Spherical, I hope he's alive. I hope he's alive. I was getting death flags all over when they're like, has anybody seen Spherical? Oh, well, a couple of years have passed. Has anybody seen him? He must be on the farm. Go give him this message. Death flags. I'm like, I've watched enough anime to know a death flag when I see it. My fear is that they're going to go, like, Thorfinn and Einar are going to go to Spherical, and that's when, like, a fight's going to break out, and Canute's troops are going to show up or something, and Spherical's going to die. And then where's Snake in all of this? Arnheid, it doesn't sound like Arnheid had a baby, so she's probably not pregnant. I wondered, but it doesn't seem, all they said was that Kettle's not letting her go. Well, Kettle is conveniently left to go see Harold. Be a real shame if Einar got to run off with Arnheid. Just saying. Would be a real shame if she somehow got out of that. But we'll talk about that scene in a minute because we haven't even gone through the episode yet. But I'm just like, I'm so excited by all these possibilities, right? So Snake, Arnheid, we'll talk about Leif and Ylva. And then the mom, bless her heart, can't remember her name. We'll talk about her. But yeah, it's so fascinating, the similarities and differences between Canute and Thorfinn at this point. And watching Thorfinn find this inner peace. He finds this inner peace and sanctuary in Einar and in Kettle's farm, and this simple act of farming the land. Something so simple and rudimentary gives Thorfinn this inner peace that he didn't have before, and it's beautiful. And meanwhile, all the gold and the power and the lust, it's like dragging Canute into this hell, whereas something so simple as nature is lifting Thorfinn up into the heavens. Like, it's just such a great, like, dynamic of them falling and rising, and it gets me. I love it so much. But yeah, let's go into this episode. The minute you start with an OP, you know it's a good thing. And the idea of the gaping hole opening up in Canute's cheek becomes Sven's eye. Oh, that visual. Because I was like, is it a mouth that opens up? But no, it's an eyeball. It's his father's eye. This cut from Thorfinn becomes the eye of his father. Oh, it's Shakespearean and beautiful, and I love it so much. But yeah, let's go here to this episode, The Cursed Head. Yeah, but y'all, I felt like a friend of mine. If you've not seen Top Gun before, a friend of mine, we're talking about like the homoeroticism of the first Top Gun, and it kind of is there. Abs for days, y'all. I feel like doing that meme where it's like, I watch Vinland Saga for the plot, and every still frame of the 8-pack that Einar and Thorfinn has is the plot of this series. I love it so much because, yeah, it's the funny thing is, like, inadvertently, like, Thorfinn... There's a shot in the episode where Canute has the crown on his chest, right? On his stomach. And we know that Sven had kind of like a beer gut, right? Because he was a king. So he just ate and like did counsel. He wasn't actually out fighting the battles. Canute seems to be fighting his own battles, except when he's poisoning everybody. So there's that. But you don't see like Canute as the shredded warrior, right? You don't even see like Canute's like figure in this episode, which feels a bit symbolic. Like he's kind of maybe softer because he's not had to fight. But the funny thing is, Einar and Thorfinn have not had to fight either. Their entire, like, sculpted 8-packs are from chopping down trees and tilling the land. Farmland Saga has made our two men into men. And God, the moment we see, like, Thorfinn's long ponytail, like, I just wanted his hair to grow out, and it's grown out. I feel like things have been accomplished. He has a long ponytail now. It's beautiful. 3 years have passed. And in 3 years, that makes me feel so good about this episode because that means in 3 years, Thorfinn has had all this time to work through his demons. He's now in his mid-20s. So it's been, 9 years? So he's like 25, 26. So he's like in his mid-20s now. Thorfinn is. He's in his mid-20s, in the prime of his life. He's hot. It's like, we can simp for Thorfinn for days. And Einar's pretty good. But Thorfinn's so small, too. He's so short. He's probably like 5'7" or something. I'm 5'8", so maybe we're about the same height. But like, him handing the axe over, I'm sorry, but y'all don't want me to ship them? Romania Mac would be out here in a heartbeat being like, y'all, dudes, the inner shipper in me was just like I went back before starting this discussion and took screenshot after screenshot of them like topless hugging, and I'm like, what do you expect me to do? The Einar and Thorfinn ship's back on, y'all. Add Arnheid in there. Make it an OT3. She can come in. She doesn't seem to mind Thorfinn. She'd be fine with it. Thorfinn probably wouldn't want anything to do with her, but he wouldn't care if she was there. It would be fine. It would be fine. But yeah, I love that they both share the axe to chop down the last tree together. And that's kind of the big difference too, is that Canute's kind of all alone. He's pushed Thorkel away. Thorkel doesn't like him because he doesn't like the way he handles things. He just has Gunnar, and Gunnar is kind of a weasel. So Gunnar is kind of like the diet right version of Ragnar. So Canute's kind of all alone. He only has the ghosts of his father to talk to, and that's kind of terrifying, right? And he's so paranoid of everything around him. He thinks people are trying to poison him. He thinks that people are out for him. Everyone is an enemy, right? And Thorfinn, under this beautiful tree, no one's an enemy. Einar and him are BFFs, chopping down that last tree together like it's the most wholesome thing in the world, right? It's just so good. And them like pushing on the tree together with hands above hands. How do you expect me not to ship? And then, yeah, they push down the tree together. It's the most beautiful thing. Them and their damn 8-packs. Just freaking buff. Just such buff. And when Einar's like, we did it, Thorfinn. And Thorfinn's eyes are sparkling. He's just so happy. It's so good. Like him getting in the headlock, like just two bros chopping down trees and farming together, spending their nights in a barn in the hay, like you do. I'm going to try to rein in myself and control my shipping, but it's hard, y'all. It's very hard because I want to ship them so badly. But yeah, just like, and they just like patting each other on the back. And I'm sorry, Thorfinn with the damn smile. I didn't know I needed something like that in my life until this episode happened. Because you've taken a character who's been through hell and back, and who we've watched go through the darkest depths of despair, and for him to find inner peace and friendship and love of life is like the most inspiring thing I can think of. And that smile means so much. And no matter what happens to him from here on in, no matter what happens, you know there's going to be pain, there's going to be angst. I'm going to savor that. You can't take that away from me, show. It's there forever. I have it saved. But that smile, he looks like Askeladd in that picture. He looks like Askeladd laughing, only any semblance of cynicism and doubt and self-loathing that Askeladd would have when doing a laugh like that is gone. It's pure, unadulterated joy. And it is healing, y'all, to see him so freaking happy. It's like, we earned this. Thorfinn earned this. I love it so much. And they cleared out the farm, and it took them 3 years. We turned an entire forest into a farm. On the one hand, it's kind of surprising because you just sit there and you go, this happened. This literally just happened overnight, seemingly in the span of like 3 episodes. But then when you realize it's taken 3 years of them doing all this hard work by themselves, it's kind of fascinating. But then, and they both kind of accepted their roles, that they're slaves and that they've worked towards their freedom. And Thorfinn's like, we're nearly there. We've worked so hard and we're nearly to our own freedom. And Einar's like, yeah, he's like, Pater told me the other day that this harvest they're going to gain, we can buy our freedom with the harvest from this next crop. And they're like, what are we going to do? We're going to get some money back. And Thorfinn's like, okay. I love how stoic and beautiful and just kind of just humbled Thorfinn looks, right? And that's kind of the other thing too I wanted to say about this, is that Thorfinn has fell to the pits and rock bottom of being a slave and having to work himself up from the very bottom of the cliff. Whereas Canute, it's this really interesting dynamic. You have Thorfinn, who hears the bottom of the well, and he's had to climb his way back up to the top, slowly but surely. And it's gave him this appreciation of life, of humility, of humanity, and understanding his sins and carrying that with him. And it's beautiful. And then you have Canute, who has always been on the precipice looking down. You have Thorfinn, who's had to rise up and crawl his way to the top and is still working on it. He's nowhere near the top. He's still a slave, but he's crawling his way back up to his own self-actualization. And you have Canute, who's always been at the top, whether he was royalty, whether he's protected by Ragnar, whether Askeladd was promoting him, whether he was the prince, whether he's been getting that crown. He's been at the top, always afraid of the fall, but not physically taking it, but mentally taking it, right? So Canute is physically in the realm of a king, but mentally he is spiraling into this despair, seemingly. He doesn't seem to think so. He thinks everything's fine. We'll talk about that. But then you have Thorfinn, who's far from the top, far from it, but he's able to rise himself mentally to a king. I feel like. But I feel like he has like a king's mentality, right? A true warrior that doesn't use a sword. Mm-hmm. But also doesn't use poison, like Canute, right? And so then Thorfinn asks Einar what he's going to do when he's a free man. And Einar says, well, here's my problem. I don't have a family waiting for me. And that's where I don't think Thorfinn's going home. I think Canute's going to get involved in the next several episodes. Even if it's inadvertently, I think Canute's influence is going to get involved, and it's going to keep Thorfinn from being able to go home. I honestly, the shipper in me, like, wants Thorfinn to take Einar home with him. Be like, come and meet the family, Einar. Come and meet my sister. But it's a hard thing, right? It's so hard because Thorfinn hasn't seen them for 20 years. For nearly 20 years. 2 decades. He's not seen his family. We don't know if Elva's even alive. We don't know if Ylva's alive. We don't know if she has kids of her own, a family. We don't know if his mother's alive. We have no idea. Thorfinn has spent his whole life believing that he wasn't worthy of seeing them again, that he didn't have a home to go back to, that he didn't belong there, and that he didn't deserve any love. And now he's slowly getting back to that point, and I kind of want him to grab, Einar doesn't have a home. Thorfinn, take Einar home with you. Show him the family. I'm sure they'll love him. But yeah, I just feel like Thorfinn's this close from being able to go see Leif again, damn it, to see Leif, to see his family, and something's going to happen that's going to keep him from going home. And all I want him to do is see his home again, to see his family, right? Because it seems like such a waste. Einar doesn't have his family. He doesn't have the luxury of going home to them. Thorfinn not only has a hometown still, but has a family, to our knowledge, still. So, I mean, the only exception would be if he goes back to Iceland and then finds out they're dead or they were sold into slavery or something happened. And that would be awful. But I don't know. I would like to hope that that's not the case. But yeah, Einar is like, I don't have anybody waiting to go back to me. And he says, besides. And then, yeah, Thorfinn, matchmaker. Thorfinn's like, you're worried about Arnheid, right? Yeah. And he's like, you're worried you don't want to leave her behind. That's the one thing that I get worried about, is that I wonder when Kettle made the offer for them to become retainers and to stay on the farm like Pater, because you have the idea that Pater probably didn't have a home to go back to either. So that's the problem, is it going to be like one of those situations like Pater? I could see Einar staying there, but then the problem is that Arnheid is never going to be with Einar as long as Kettle's alive. So again, the only opportunity I think that Einar will even have with Arnheid is if Canute's forces come or something happens and Kettle dies. That's the case. But then would Olmar try to marry her because they're closer in age? Or would the mistress try to just get rid of her because she doesn't want to see her anymore? That's a really good question, and I don't know how we're going to answer that. But yeah, Thorfinn knows that Einar doesn't want to leave Arnheid behind. And he's like, yeah, I feel awkward about it. Yeah, because your master is like in love with her. And so it's just, he's like, if only Arnheid could be free too. But she can't, then I'd feel better. He feels guilty for leaving her behind, right? That they've worked so hard, but yet she doesn't get that freedom. And Thorfinn kind of knows the writing on the wall. He's like, yeah, Kettle has no intention of letting her go. And we don't see Einar's reaction, but he knows. And then Einar changes the subject. Like Einar knows that there's no hope in this situation, so he changes it to ask Thorfinn what he's going to do. And so he asks Thorfinn if he's going back to Iceland. And Thorfinn says, yeah, I think so. Probably. But he's like, you don't seem sure about your plans. And Thorfinn's like, yeah, neither do you. But honestly, how do you go back after nearly 20 years? Like, what do you say? What do you explain? How do you explain it? Like, I'm sure Leif would welcome him with open arms and would believe that he was sold into slavery because he's been looking for him. But, like, where do you even start? Right? So that's such a hard situation. There's a huge part of me that wants him to go home. But then there's another part of me that realizes how difficult that would be and all the memories and feelings that would dredge up. So I get it, why he's not gone back home or why, but he's thinking about it. But I feel like the plot's going to say, nope, no home for you, Thorfinn. I feel like the plot's just getting ready to kick in with it, right? And he's like, freedom's around the corner, and we're acting like this. I'm like, quit jinxing it, Einar. You say freedom's around the corner, and that's what I'm afraid of. Freedom's around the corner, and then the next couple episodes, something's going to happen with Canute and his army or something, and it's going to like squash all of that, and it's going to be like, why? That's what I'm waiting on. I'm waiting to be horribly frustrated. I think that's what's going to happen, is I'm going to be horribly frustrated. But Thorfinn, in this moment, looking down at his hands and just putting them together like in prayer, like thinking back to when Einar was praying for the crop, praying to anything that they would get their crop. And then him realizing like all their hard work and everything. And that it just shows how thankful he is in that moment. That he's like, there's something I'd like to try to do. And Einar's like, really? What's that? What are you going to try to do? And he's like, well, there's a lot I'm still not sure about. Meaning Thorfinn ain't going back to Iceland yet because he has to go on a world peace tour. That's what we're doing, aren't we? He says, there's a lot I'm not sure about. And the wind blowing through the grass. But then he like prays about it, right? He's like, what do you think, Einar? He's like, Thorfinn saying, would it be possible to rid the world of war and slavery? It's a tall order. That's a real tall order. And Einar's like, what? Like, how are you going to do that, you no-name man? But Thorfinn looks really like, Thorfinn just looking there so serious. Like, I want to get a picture of it. Just so serious in that moment. Like, he just looks like, what do you think, Einar? Could we win? I'm like, is Einar going to become Thorfinn's right-hand man on this quest for peace? I'm like, is Thorfinn becoming a priest? Like, I don't, is Thorfinn going to become an actualized, like, priest, martyr? Martyr means he would die. I don't want Thorfinn to die. But it seems like he's almost had this, like, Zen religious moment. And Einar's kind of like, okay, what are we going to do with this? He's like, that would be a dream if that were to happen. But easier said than done. And Einar seems to seriously consider him for a moment. He says, that would be like a dream. And that's when Kettle and Olmar... I like that Olmar's tried to grow out this mustache. What the hell is Olmar wearing? He has like the belt buckle with the skull and like these frayed edges. He looks like he came out of an 80s rock video. I'm like, Olmar. And Kettle says, you've worked hard, Thorfinn and Einar. And then he says that as soon as they're done sowing the seed, he'll let them free. And Thorfinn, I love Thorfinn's smiley face. Like, he's like, hey, it's like last episode we had him being all happy and cheerful in his voice actor and it felt so unnatural. But here it's again, that happy medium. He's not like bubbly like he was at the beginning of Oath, but he's like, you can tell there's this matured sense of worth and pride that's kind of becoming Thorfinn. And it looks good on him. I'm not going to lie. But I just love Einar getting all excited about it. And then he says, I have to go somewhere first. And that's like red flag number one. The moment he's like, well, you guys will get your freedom when I get back. And it's like, no, that means they're not getting their freedom because you're going to die. Like, I'm getting all these death flags for Kettle, right? He says, I have to go figure out what Harold... He says, I have to go talk to Harold. And the moment he says Spherical's not been this way, I'm like, Spherical's probably dead on his farm. I don't like where this is headed. I don't know. He's like, I've gone to Jelling to visit Harold. So we know that Canute's in Jelling right now, but are the timelines going to intersect that he runs into Kettle at the same time? I don't know. But he's like, I'll be back in time for planting. And Olmar's just like, whatevers. And then he's like, and then as he's leaving, think about returning and being my retainers once I come back, once you're free. It's just setting all this stuff up to go to hell in a handbasket within the next few episodes, right? Right? I feel like it is. But yeah, so then we have this Bible verse, right? This is how we transition. And I wanted to read this out loud because in the episode, the reaction, I couldn't read in time. What benefit is there for the worker from that which he labors? I have seen the task which God has given the sons of mankind with which to occupy themselves. He has made everything appropriate in its time. So the question asking, what's the point of working? What is the point of your labors? And the task, the person says, what benefits are there for the worker from work? Like, why do you work? Because they've seen what God has given them to occupy themselves. The task. So yeah, okay. So this idea of why do we work? What do we work for? And the idea that God has given tasks, right? That God has given tasks to occupy. He has made everything appropriate in its time. So he's given tasks to last a lifetime. Trials, basically. He's given them trials. He's given, which kind of ties back to the first season, because Canute all the time in the first season, Canute was all like, what are the point of these trials? Why do we have to fight these trials? What's the point? These trials are set up for us to fail. So that kind of ties back to this, the idea of why labor, why work, when God has given you trials that you cannot surpass, right? You can work and work and work, but never surpass what's been put in front of you. So what's the point? Right? And then it transitions to the next verse. And the next verse says, he has also set eternity in their heart, without the possibility that mankind will find out the work which God has done from the beginning, even to the end. So this idea that God has given them trials that will last a lifetime. And man sees eternity in his heart and questions, why do I have these tasks that cannot be completed? So yeah, that ties back to season 1. Season 1, Canute was all like, Canute's lament with religion was, he's like, we've been given these trials. God has tasked us with something that we cannot overcome and we cannot beat. So what's the point? Why do we pray for something that's not going to come to us? Was Canute's whole struggle. But that's kind of the big difference between Canute and Thorfinn, right? Thorfinn's whole journey is, his whole idea is about traveling alongside. It's about the journey, right? Thorfinn's whole thing is about the journey. It's like he understands, he doesn't know what's at the end of the journey. He doesn't know what's there. He doesn't know what's at the top of the ladder, but he knows that he wants to keep climbing. He has to keep climbing because he doesn't want to fall to the bottom. So for Thorfinn, this zen that he has, the work that he does is for himself, and it's for his own personal journey to become a better person, to become like the ideals his father set forth from him. So for Thorfinn, I think Thorfinn kind of understands the meaning of it all, even though he doesn't understand that Thorfinn is unaware that he's kind of cracking the code, right? Whereas Canute, this whole thing befuddles Canute because he's like, what's the point? He's like, why am I rising to the top if this is it? Like that end line where he's like, this is nothing. This is all it took to be strong. Just killing everyone around me. That's not hard. And honestly, it reminded me of another series, and we'll talk about it when we get to the very end, but it reminded me of another series. It reminded me of Monster. So if you've watched Monster before, I'm in the process of watching it on my channel. I'm not very far into it, but we'll talk about it here shortly. But yeah, the idea of why give these trials to us knowing that we can't ever succeed or exceed them. And that's Ecclesiastes 3:9-11. I know I just said that wrong, but... And then we cut to the Hawkeye was really cool. The animation on the Hawkeye was great. And we have all of these boats and everything, boats and hoes going back. And Canute has this sweet-ass Jaguar paperweight. Hell yeah. And all of these books. All these books that he's been reading on his journey, right? And the idea that he's been reading all of these things. Like such a contrast to Thorfinn. Thorfinn has been out working the land, not reading a damn thing. Only reading the svelte ab lines on his friend Einar's chiseled abdomen. While Canute's been studying up on war and politics, most likely. And so they're arriving to gelling. And then, man, it's just like, I get to simp for two characters now. I get to simp for Thorfinn looking at his best, Canute looking at his best. I wish Canute's hair was longer. He still has kept it short, which I'm sad about, but what can we do? He's kept the hair short, which is interesting. Thorfinn's growing his hair out. Canute's keeping it short. The contrast, y'all, the contrast. But then they arrive on the shore, and he's reminded of the game that his brother and him used to play. And we meet Wolf. Wolf's an interesting character. He has like the cross-shaped scar on his head that is in no way... It looks like a cross, but it also looks like a hoe. So it's symbolic. And I love it. But he says King Harold is not well. And the thing of it is that Canute asks, how much longer does he have? Like, that's such a weird thing to ask. Like, what do you think? How much longer does he have? And he's like, well, the next few days are going to be critical. And so he's like, I'm here to see him. and he goes back to remembering what it was like as kids. I like the way he says, my brother was quite good at it when we were children. And the way that Wolf looks at him, Wolf is such an interesting character. I was like, hello, tall, dark, and handsome. And Wolf just stares at him so interestingly, like he's staring him down. And he said he occasionally played with me. And again, man, Harold knew what was up. Harold called Ragnar being overprotective way before season 1 even started. And baby Canute looks like the little guy in Christmas Story that has his arms stuck out and he like can't put his arms down because he has too much padding. And if you notice, like Ragnar and Harold don't have any padding at all. Like it's not that cold out, but Ragnar wanted to protect his son Canute. Like you do. And Harold tries to tell him that he's babying him too much, but he just lets him go, right? That's the thing. He lets him go. And then Ragnar says, a warrior must be properly equipped. Damn. And man, Harold like was such a good looking guy, right? It's a shame that his brother poisoned him. Oh my God. I love the visual of the ball rolling from the kid and it's the head. Like the idea that Canute is haunted by his father's dismembered head is so disturbing and amazing. It's Shakespearean. It's poetry. It's so good. I'm like, oh yes, I love it. And then yeah, even Canute with the facial hair, he still has that soft look in his eye, right? And then he's just, I love the shot of him holding his eyes and just like looking out them so darkly. I love the idea of it's a beautiful sunny day in nature with Thorfinn and we cut to Canute and it's just overcast and dripping in the angst. But yeah, so we get the idea the two sons inherited their respective territories from their father and we have Canute with the haircut when they were younger and Harold inheriting Denmark, and then we see them older. And we see like Canute as he is now and Harold as he is now. And so at first, up until the point where we find out that Canute poisoned him, I thought that maybe Harold had like gotten sick like with a terminal illness or something because it was back in the Viking days. They didn't know what that was, you know. But no, Canute killed him. And at first I was like, well, maybe Canute just believes that he's responsible for his brother's death. Maybe he just believed that someone poisoned him in his name, or maybe it was something. But the moment that Canute says to the king's head was like, oh, there couldn't be two of us. It would eventually cause conflict. Someone had to die. I was like, holy shit, he did kill his brother who cared for him. And the thing of it is they establish that Harold supported him throughout all of this. Harold seemed like a nice guy. Like he supported Canute. He gave him ships. He was kind to them when they were kids. Like I get his hatred towards Sven because Sven seems like he was a terrible dad and like was all about their siblings battling it out to figure out who was going to be the strongest. I get why Canute hated his father and wanted him to die. But his brother that was kind to him and did all these things for him and supported him, and he got so greedy and jealous, not jealous, but so greedy and paranoid about that relationship severing and causing him to lose his power and lose the crown that he was willing to kill his own brother. Just amazing. That just, oh my God, that opening up a whole can of worms on Canute and where his character is at. And here's the thing. And so his sister comes in, and at first I wondered, and they say that Harold had no heirs, which honestly surprises me, because Sven seems to have had kids all over the place, right? They just all eventually died, except for his sister and his brother. I'm like, is he going to kill his sister? Because he's afraid she'll, like, what if she ends up marrying, like, Thorfinn or something? I can't see Thorfinn marrying anybody, but what if she, like, gets with Thorfinn or something, and he's like, okay, yeah, I guess this is the next step towards my happiness. What if? And then Canute's like, guess I gotta kill you too. I don't think Thorfinn's getting married. I prescribe to asexual Thorfinn, but if it would be amazing if like he got with her, with the sister, that would be something incredible. But she seems like so happy to see him, like brother Canute, and she's so kind, and she's like, oh, you did come to gelling, like she's so nice. And then he's like, and then Estrid. That's her name. Estrid. Where's she on here? Not Enid. Estrid. I was kind like, bitch, please with Canute, because she's like, brother, you came all this way. And he's like, address me as your majesty's sister. I'm like, you guys are siblings. Like, have some informality, but no. Like, he's really cold to her. And she's like, oh, your visit's so sudden. He just, rather convenient that Harold's dying, and it's right after Canute's poisoned him, and he just shows up just in time to take advantage and get the kingdom handed over to him. And the thing that's crazy about it is that Thorfinn's killings have all been very, very visceral and very in your face and by Thorfinn's hands. That's the big difference. Okay, Thorfinn's deaths are all by his hands. All of them. Canute's killed a man, right? Canute killed someone, right? They established he didn't kill someone. But the main deaths have not been with his own hands. It's not been with his own hands, right? There's a scene in Full Metal Alchemist where a character, Riza, Hawkeye, she's a character and she uses guns a lot, and she makes the comment that guns are great because you don't have to feel your enemies die by them. She says, like a sword and a knife, you have to feel your enemies die, but with a gun you don't feel it at all. And that's kind of how I feel like Canute is. Canute doesn't have the weight of the dead on him like Thorfinn does, because Canute's not actually killed these people. He's had them poisoned, or other people have killed them for him. So it's put that degree of separation between him and the fallen, whereas Thorfinn has been directly responsible for the fallen. So he has that weight on his hands that Canute does not have. Askeladd killed his dad, so that's another a barrier of separation, right? God, it's fascinating. But yeah, he just happens to show up as his brother is dying. And so it's almost like he doesn't have the guilt because, I mean, until the head of his father shows up, he doesn't have the guilt because his brother doesn't realize that Canute's responsible for his death. And so he's like, oh, Denmark's yours, brother. Showing how much he loved his brother. He was willing to give anything to his brother, even his kingdom. And Canute knew that and took advantage of it. It's absolutely amazing. And so, yeah, the sister, what I am surprised by is the fact that Harold doesn't have any kids, because, you know, Sven was all about like the family line and the bloodlines and all that. I'm amazed that Harold has no children, that he didn't have a wife and kids, especially as old as he is. Like, he would have been in his 30s. So that's interesting that he didn't father any children, unless there's like unless he has like an illegitimate child somewhere. But you would think he would have taken the woman that was the mother in, so that he could have an illegitimate heir. I thought the moment they said he had no heirs, now that Harold's gone, Canute is the only one left. So I'm like, is Canute going to have to find a lady bride? I'm hoping this isn't going to go all Game of Thrones and go Lannister style on this, but I hope Estrid's okay. But I'm like, is he going to have to try to find a wife and secure like a kid of his own to be the heir? Would he do that? I don't know, because if he's going to be king, or would he not have kids because he's afraid the kids will try to kill him, you know? He might not want any kids himself because he's so paranoid that he may think his own child would try to kill him and take the throne. Right? Like Sven was. Oh my God. Maybe, it's kind of fascinating, but the moment that like he takes his hand and like Estrid's like crying there, like tearing up at her brother, and he says, Denmark is yours. And the moment we don't see Canute's face, but we see him smile, I was like, oh, Canute has become an antagonist. A full-blown antagonist. This was what he wanted. He wanted the throne. And then he says, oh, don't be absurd, King Harold. And it's all a lie. He's like, get well soon so we can play ball again. Like, he's just lying through his teeth. And his dead father's head calls him out on it. I'm impressed you can lie about like you don't know what's going on. You're visiting the man you poisoned yourself. Harold was friendly to you. You didn't do it for the sake of peace and prosperity like you say you are. Ambition rests in your heart. Yeah, you're greedy and you have ambition and corruption. Whereas Thorfinn's like abandoned all of that. It's so fascinating. But yeah, and it's just like Canute's lying to himself, being like, well, this is all for the sake of uniting the kingdom into a utopia. And it's like, no, you didn't have to do these things. And God, I love the visual of the crown, the curse that is the crown's curse. And you see like the mouth of Sven like swallowing it. He's like, none can escape it. And then we see all these men by donning the 2 crowns of Denmark and England. He said, you'll carry twice the burden. Because it shows him with all the soldiers, you'll suffer twice as much as I did. And then we see like the old version of Canute, which is still quite good looking despite being old. But like he has like the scar and his face is longer and he has the beard. But he looks his age. Oh, I love it. And we see like him on the crown, like heavy set like Sven was, but with the giant tree, like the Nordic tree coming out, and there's like the angels of Valhalla and the reds and greens. Oh, it's so good. So good, y'all. And the ground just stomping around him and just being upheaved around him. It's absolutely amazing. And that's when Estrid's like, hey, bro, you need to like snap out of it. And then he leaves. And then he leaves and looks back to see like them tending to his brother and the curtain. I love this. The Shakespearean scene where he's holding the crown and talking to the head is absolutely insanity. And I freaking love it. And so here's the thing. His sister gets him something to drink and he questions whether or not it's poison from the girl. Now, granted, he is right to question that because he just heard, a bunch of people in the room just heard Harold give him Denmark. So he does have the right to be worried that someone is trying to poison him. He has every right to be concerned about that, but it's so horrible that he's at this point where he has to question whether his own family, the only ones he has left, are trying to kill him as well. And why does he look so damn handsome? Vinland Saga, y'all, giving us stuff to simp about all day. We thought Askeladd was going to be the most we'd get. He says, I'm not thirsty. I feel like Canute and Thorfinn are our asexual kings. They're not thirsty. Maybe they're meant for one another. Maybe my Canute Thorfinn ship isn't totally lost. They can be asexual kings together on their quest to find the purpose of life. But yeah, you fear being poisoned because you poison others. And he sees the head in the corner. I just love that. It's so creepy and wonderfully disturbing seeing the head in the corner. Just chuckling. And then he's just sitting there like, it was rather mischievous of you to appear in the middle of the afternoon, King Sven. I'm like, red flag. He's talking to himself. Yeah. Just sitting there talking to it like in the corner. And he's like, oh, if you can see me during the day, the curse must be getting stronger. And then, how long are you going to keep standing there? He like tells the girl to leave and she's like, is he talking to himself? And she leaves. And that's when he sits back with the crown on his chest. Uniting the nation is essential to creating a utopia. 2 kings would eventually cause trouble. But I'm like, you don't know that! You didn't know that! That was your brother that loved you and supported you! You don't know that! He had no heirs! Like, just that unknown King Harold. And I love that he says, here's the thing, he doesn't refer to people by their names. He says King Sven, not father, King Sven. He puts that degree of separation there, right? He doesn't call Harold his brother. He says King Harold's death was necessary. Doesn't acknowledge the fact that it's his brother. He tells his sister to call him his majesty, possibly because he'll have to kill her too. So he's just putting all these degrees of separation between them so he doesn't get attached. Oh, it's masterful. And he says, you've come to think like a real king, Canute. But the thing about it is, this is all in Canute's head. This is how Canute thinks his father thinks. And how he now thinks. And he starts to laugh. And I almost wanted to see him, like, look crazy and maniacal in this moment, saying, King Sven, I once hated and wished for your death. I'm like, oh my God. But now he says, you're the only one I can speak to frankly. I'm like, you can only speak to your dead father's head frankly. He needs an Einar. Canute needs an Einar real quick. I'm like, I'm glad Thorfinn found Einar so that he's not gone to Cuckoo Town like Canute has. Because, yeah, he's like, you're the only one. He's like, I can only speak to myself frankly. And the idea that he says, let us be friends. As he puts the crown back on his head, as befits two cursed men. Oh my God. And then, yeah. And then he just disappears back into his mind palace. So yeah, Einar's Canute's only friend is himself. But it's so messed up. It's so messed up. And he thinks back to as a kid when Harold tells him to grow up. He's like, become stronger than my father and I. And I'm like, well, if by becoming stronger than you and your father means killing you and your father, then Canute has indeed done that. But I'm like, but here's the thing. But what Harold was talking about in becoming stronger, it's just like the ghost of Thor's. You have to understand what he was meaning by his words. And I don't think that the strength that Harold is talking about is what Canute has interpreted it to be. So there's that whole deal. And Canute he sees Sven taking him to his war council, right? But Harold seems like he turned out like a decent person despite all that. Canute, not so much. And then Ragnar's like, I'll be your next opponent. Which, God, he's dead now. So he's like, what, can you even play Ragnar? And Ragnar says, how dare you? I used to be the Gullinbursti of the lake for 7 consecutive years. Like, he was really good at this game. And then we cut to it being a barren wasteland now. And then I was waiting for it to go back to Canute, looking at him viewing. And he says, is that all there is to it? Is me becoming stronger than my brother and my father, just me killing them and taking this crown? Was that all that was it? And he says, this is nothing. A little bit concerned for Canute. Hashtag concerned for Canute. But yeah, no, this episode was absolutely 100% amazing. And I am here for it, y'all. Absolutely here for it. What else can I say? I love this episode. I could talk for days about it, but I feel like I've spoken enough. So I want to hear your thoughts about this episode and what you thought about this madness and Canute's Shakespearean turn. So yeah, I hope y'all have a wonderful week. Please stay safe. Take care. Hope y'all enjoyed this discussion. But yeah, I'm excited to hear your comments down below, but I will be back next week. And I'm so freaking excited for episode 11 of Vinland Saga. Bye.